Hi, right, I'm going to do a little series of videos, I think, on muscle building myths. You know, the world of muscle building is full of old wives' tales. Let's probably call them old bodybuilders' tales. And I've experienced and probably tried every single one of them. You know, I've been lifting weights. I think I probably first lifted a weight in 1984 when I was 11. I think I bought my first bodybuilding magazine. I probably bought my first bodybuilding magazine in about 1984, and the first time I remember reading about Mr. Olympia and thinking, oh, I want to be Mr. Olympia one day and I am going to become Mr. Olympia, was back in 1985. Obviously life didn't quite take the turns that I anticipated for it, but in a roundabout way, I make my living and I feed my family via bodybuilding now. And it's been a very interesting journey. So I want to share with you my thoughts, for what they're worth, on myths of muscle building, because in many ways it's been my life's obsession, which sounds strange for me to say that now, but it is true. So the first thing we're going to deal with in today's video, because I wanted to keep these things as brief as possible, is the myth that refuses to die of you've got to train a muscle group once a week. First of all, why once a week? Where does this concept that you train chest on a Monday and arms on a Tuesday and back on a Wednesday, legs on a Thursday, abs and calves or abs and delts on a Friday, rest on a weekend, where does that come from? It's rubbish. Old-time bodybuilders in the days before performance-enhancing drugs, and I don't really want to talk about performance-enhancing drugs and muddy the waters, but it's going to come into it with this one. Old-time bodybuilders used to train their bodies 3 times a week. Full body routines, weight train 3 times a week, 4 times a week. I don't think that's going to work for most people for reasons that are beyond the scope of this video. But there is no logical reason to train a body part once a week. Why not once every 10 days? Why not once every 5 days? Something that you need to get into your head is this: the ability to train a muscle as frequently as possible is one of the greatest potentiators of muscle growth going. People do not change the frequency at which they train a body part. Why not? Can you not think? It's going to do something different to your body. You've been locked into training a body part once a week. What happens if you go and train it 3 times a week? What if you've been used to training a body part once every 5 days, which is generally what I recommend, which we'll get into in a second? What happens if you then go to training temporarily 3 times a week or once every 3 days? Something different is going to happen. It's a different stress. By forcing your body to go through something new, so long as it is appropriate and right, you're going to get a positive adaptive response. And in the weight training game, what we're talking about is you're going to build some new muscle. Now, you might overreach, which is essentially a term for temporary overtraining. So you could train it, you could do what Frank Zane did. Frank Zane, the very famous, iconic Mr. Olympia from the 1970s, would train his weak body part, his back, 3 times a week. But you wouldn't train back 3 times a week all year. You might train back 3 times a week for a month and then go back to training back once every 5 days, or even back off to once a week. Now, why? So I hope, first of all, that explains to you. Frequency of training a specific body part is one variable that we can use in our training that people seem to ignore. Don't ever leave anything on the table. Bring it all in, because trust me, building muscle is hard, right? It's hard to do. Now, what's the problem with training once a week? Why have I got a hard-on for it? Very simple. Unless you're using performance-enhancing drugs, what happens is this. You train. Now, actually after training, you could say you damage a muscle. But then, the adaptive response is to lay down new muscle tissue. So if here is baseline, you might temporarily go here. And then over the course of, let's say, 48 hours, and it varies, there are studies, but it varies because it depends on how you've trained. If you do low volume, the curve is going to be different from if you do high volume, where you need more rest. If you do lots and lots of eccentric training, you're going to need to rest longer because you're going to cause more damage to the muscle. This, for instance, is why swimmers can do so much training, because how much eccentric can contractions are they doing? How many loaded eccentric contractions are they doing? Not a lot, right? Not a lot. It's virtually all, if not all, concentric. So they can train for 6 hours a day. You can't sprint for 6 hours a day. Maybe you've not thought of that before. So, frequency. We come up. Now, do you go up and then stay up forever? No, because otherwise you could train a body part once a year and make incremental progress, even being a lazy bastard. We all know that you need to train with a degree of frequency. So is 7 days optimal? No, because what happens to non-drug assisted trainees is that you go up and then you start to detrain. And that detraining effect takes place well before 7 days. Now, you may say, well, Nick, I smashed myself to smithereens in the gym. I can't recover. I'm natural and I can't recover until the 7th day. I don't believe you. And or you're doing more than you need to do. You need to find that sweet spot. You know, training, nutrition, all of this stuff is not about looking at an individual thing through the straw. Because if it was all about application of volume, we will train for 12 hours a day. Or you could train for 24 hours, have a month off, train for 24 hours. It doesn't work that way. You need to hit the sweet spot. And you need to manipulate the sweet spot because the sweet spot changes. This is why it's hard. Change, the goalposts change every time. So, I would always say this. Really, you want to be looking at training a body part every 3 to 5 days. 3 to 6 days. Let's go by 2 to 6 days we could even do. And how do you decide? Well, you decide based on the actual application of, work, the actual volume that you give a particular muscle group. If you do 6 sets for a body part, you can train more frequently than if you do 16 sets. What type of training are you doing? Again, as I said, if you're doing a lot of heavy negatives, you need a longer. Light pumping work, you can train quite a lot, quite often. You need to balance it out with actually how much volume you're capable of doing within the training routine. Because realistically speaking, whilst I don't think you need to be locked into this concept of you train for an hour and anything after an hour and everything starts to eat away at itself, after an hour or so, you're making friends in the gym, you're not really training hard because your blood sugar's dropped, you're running out of energy and you can't put in quality work. So you can only do so much anyway in a given session. So in other words, please get this idea. Chest is Monday, back is Tuesday, arms is Wednesday. Get this out of your head. Train a little bit more often, a little bit more frequently, and I do promise you, your results will go up. It would be better for most people. Let's just say you can do 12 sets per body part if you train once a week. But if you train body part twice a week, you can do 8 sets at each workout. Well, those 16 sets of work are going to improve you more than the 12 once a week. I promise you that. I'm quite particular. There are no absolutes. I think this is an absolute. Only chemically assisted bodybuilders are going to make significant hypertrophy gains by training a body part once a week. Why, by the way? I'll wrap this up and say why will they make gains and you won't? Well, you will detrain, but because of the anabolic nature of what they take, because of a positive nitrogen state and things like that, they won't detrain. So they'll go up and they'll stay. They won't keep going up. They'll go up and they'll stay. Whereas we will go here and then we'll start to come down. I hope that makes sense. As usual, train hard, think it through, give it a go. Always, you don't have to listen to my advice, but give it a go. We learn by experimenting. This is Nick Mitchell and I will speak to you soon.